Missouri's 10 Democratic senators continue to stage a filibuster, threatening to let the session expire on Friday if they don't see a controversial resolution passed without additions.
They want voters to decide if they want to make it tougher for state constitutional amendments to pass. Missouri Capitol Bureau Chief Joe McLean has been following it in Jefferson City.
Democrats say this resolution is too important to let it pass, and Republicans say it's too important to move on from. That leaves the Senate in a place where it's unlikely to get anything else done with the remaining days of session. With the Senate still deadlocked, a stack of bills passed by the House are likely to sit around until Friday and then expire. In the House, members can pass Senate bills into law, but only if there's not a single amendment added. If it is, it would have to be sent back to the Senate, again, likely to die.
Anytime in the end of session, you're right, these considerations have to be made, and we'll just have to see whether we can put on amendments and what the Senate is doing at that time.
There's a lot of bills that are in the Senate that we would like to see get through, including, the governor's #1 priority, which is the child care tax credits. We haven't seen any movement on any gun safety related bills.
Other priorities will also likely have to wait until next year, including a massive public safety bill and Senator Holly Thompson Rader's bill to ban child marriages.
I think that it will be attempted again next year.
The legislative session closes on Friday at 6, after which Governor Mike Parson would need to call a special session if any more work is to be done.